Ladies and gentlemen, independent Americans around the country and around the world. The war in Ukraine is continuing to unfold, and I want to continue to bring you guests who can add light to contrast, to heat, insight, experience, perspective. And over the last couple of days, there's somebody who I've really wanted to bring back, a returning champion, a guy who I think has tremendous insights on everything from foreign policy to patriotism to combat to fatherhood. My friend, the great and powerful Dr. Jason Dempsey returns to Independent Americans. Welcome back, sir.
Hey man, it's an honor to be here. Thanks for continuing these conversations. I'll even forgive the hyperbole.
Well, you know what, man? I think it's time for us to try to elevate voices that can pierce some of this stuff. You are one of the most thoughtful guys I know about these things that we're talking about. So I wanted
These are thorny issues, yeah.
Yeah, and you and I both got dressed up for this. You know, if folks are watching, I pulled out. I'm wearing team colors. I'm wearing Team Ukraine colors from now on. And you kind of look like you're dressed from the Zelensky wardrobe. You've got the combat-looking shirt on there.
It's me and Macron trying to get some of that reflected glory.
Yeah. So I ask everybody, but where are you? And it's been about a year. You were on last year, January 2021, episode 95. I recommend folks go back there. But Jason, where are you and how are you?
I'm in Arlington, Virginia, doing well, right? No complaints in a messed up, curvy world, healthy, happy, employed, health, nobody's sick. So we're not at war directly. So counter blessings.
Yeah, it's good perspective. I mentioned to you we might have to interrupt this because my 3-year-old is sick and sleeping right now. And I'm trying not to complain because there's people in bunkers with 3-year-olds who are sick right now with bombs getting dropped on them, right? So that's a powerful perspective inducer. But let me ask you, man, you're great at the big picture and the historical perspective. Zelensky just gave, a historic, powerful address to Congress today. We're recording this on Wednesday. Where are we? What is this moment in American history? What is this moment for the world? What is this moment for the guts of America? Last time we spoke to you, it was a gut check moment right after January 6th and the insurrection. But where are we right now, Jason?
Well, this is a heck of a moment. And what's most interesting to me is this is a shakeout moment for America. And if you just think about where we were even 3 weeks ago, let alone, a year ago, let alone 5 years ago, right? If you look at everything that's happened in terms of kind of a recentering, and just to start on the domestic side of this, right? We had a few years ago, a bunch of Republican leaders who decided the best way to celebrate America's independence was by going to Moscow and giving their fealty to Putin, right? That's no longer the case, right? 3 weeks ago, we had several congressmen at a white nationalist rally where everybody was cheering on Putin. Right? They were cheering for Putin 3 weeks ago. We had members of Congress sitting at a white nationalist rally, listening to that and participating in that. And we've had this dalliance with right-wing authoritarian regimes as represented by Putin going on for a long time. We've all seen the shirts, right? I'd rather be Russian than a Democrat. So this is really kind of a put up or shut up moment for the authoritarian strand of American politics in terms of this is what you get. These are the people you're pledging fealty to. And that being beholden or enamored by a strongman is antithetical to everything that we believe we stand for, right? It goes against the founding. It goes against our principles. You might think you love a strongman in the short term, but that's not the way you get a coherent, vibrant, healthy democracy. So we're definitely in a moment, both domestically and we can talk, there's huge shifts happening internationally as well.
On that, Jason, there's some debate right now about whether or not we are already at war with Russia, whether this is already World War III, whether it started years ago when Putin started with the fuckery on everything from invading foreign lands to cyber attacks and meddling with our election. You're an expert on war, and we've been talking on the show about kind of redefining what war is. We're redefining a lot of things, right? We're redefining what alliances look like, maybe what NATO looks like. Is it time to redefine how we consider war? And are we at war with Russia already?
Well, I think we just have to be careful with the way we talk about these things, right? Because one, you and I can say, yeah, we're probably at war. right? We don't want to, we want to limit Putin's appeal. We want to limit his power. We want to keep him contained. And we can use war terms, but we also have to recognize that we've got systems whereby war, there's a very legal definition of war. It requires a declaration. And it's typically something that, again, going all the way back to the founding, that the founding fathers are built in these systems to say, this is not something we take lightly, right? The step fully into war needs to be something very deliberate, very conscious. And so that doesn't mean we're not in a contest of wills with Vladimir Putin. That doesn't mean we're not bringing a whole ton of assets to bear to hurt him, whether it's economic sanctions, whether it's isolation, even if it's the power of public opinion worldwide. We're bringing all that to bear to undercut his authority. We're doing everything short of United States forces engaging Russia directly. And I think we need to, and when we take it out of just me and you talking about, hey, are we at war with Putin? Yeah, sure. Let's take it to that guy, to this question of, is the United States at war with Russia directly? That's a big move. It's a huge move, and it's something that we have to think about. And it's something that we really need to take seriously. And I think one of the traps that a lot of us fall into, and I'm as guilty as anyone, we look back over the last 20 years of warfare. We had this AUMF put in place post 9/11 that was extrapolated to anything and everything, right? We think we don't like what's going on in Libya. Well, let's bomb some folks, right? We don't think things are going well in Syria. We want to get involved. We want to push stuff over to Yemen. And many of us looked at that with a little bit of horror and said, well, wait a minute. If we've given the president of the United States this much power and he is able to lead us into these conflicts by just raising the specter of a threat, that can be problematic. And so now the caution we all have to take is, even if we think that, hey, this is a righteous cause, these are people we need to fight against, we have to say, well, what does that mean? And are we going to force what we think is the right process before the United States of America goes to war? Mm-hmm. And it's a wild trap for a president to be in, right? It's an advantage and it's also a trap, because Mitch McConnell can say, well, I don't think he's doing enough. It's like, all right, Mitch, what else should he do? Right? Are you willing to say right now? Mitch could hold a vote tomorrow on whether or not he thought the United States should go to war with Russia. Right? He could put forward a bill and say, we are declaring war. He won't do it. Right? And that's not to say I disagree with him. I actually think that we need to be really careful about that legal step into war. And frankly, I think what we're getting right now, there's an analogy I'll get to in a second, but right, Putin has overextended himself, shown himself to be a paper tiger, ruined his credibility, whatever he had on the world stage, and is engineering many things that have set him back by decades. He wants a superpower engagement. He wants this to be a fight between two titans because he wants to be a titan. But in this sense, in this instance, I think the administration is actually playing it fairly well, in that he's hanging himself. He's being proven, he's isolating himself. He's hurting his own cause. He's getting weaker by the day. And so I am not at the point yet where I think we need to declare war on Russia. And I don't want to give him the respect that a declaration of war would entail, because we're not threatened by him at the moment.
I think that's turning on its head in a powerful way, right? Basically what you said is, don't shoot down at trolls, right? And anybody who's, dunked on somebody on Twitter with 40 people can relate to this, right? Mm-hmm. And I haven't heard it articulated that way, Jason, frankly, especially by Democrats. I think there's this fear of nukes. There's a fear of a broader war. There is a fear of American casualties. And we actually asked Adam Kinzinger on the show last episode, would you vote to declare war? Will anybody bring forward articles of war, right? Because we have had the AUMF in place for 20 plus years and never stopped anybody before. You and I went to things that were not technically wars, right? So I guess there's a bigger question here, which is, what is America's red line, right? And can we be counted on, right? Mm-hmm. If it is a Putin's, the old saying, don't let the enemy control the tempo. If Putin does fire across a border, if he does extend beyond what the U.S. is ready for, it seems like that's where things are mushy, right? It seems like we're not, the no-fly zone, I guess, has become the new dividing line, right?
Yeah.
And maybe there will be others. But I guess the question I want to ask you is, do you feel like America has lost its edge? Do you feel like America will no longer be counted on to spill American blood? Kinzinger made the point last week that you can't treat the military like a fragile little kitten, right? There are times when you need to use it, and we should try to use it as much as we can to this point.
Mm-hmm.
What's your view on that?
I would take the opposite,
Please.
right? And I understand his point. It goes back to the old Madeleine Albright quote to Powell about, why do we have this military if we don't use it? I would submit that it's there's a true dilemma inherent in there. It's not just a simple, oh, you got a great military, don't be afraid to use it. Because what we have also seen, a belief in the all-powerful might of the United States military to do things it's not designed to do and to be the magic bullet that solves all world problems, right? That, hey, we don't understand anything about this culture. Things seem to be going sideways. We don't like these people. Send in the military, they'll knock some shit out. And then miraculously, democracy will flourish, right? The analogy I'd want to give here and what I get at is we're all hanging out in a bar, right? And there's a bully in the bar. And he's picking on somebody, right? In a really bad way. And a lot of us don't really like it. But the dude also has a gun in his waistband, right? And we like to think of, this kind of Jason Bourne dynamic. Well, I'm just going to come in, I'm going to disarm him cleanly, I'm going to punch him in the face, knock him out, right? And then everybody's going to cheer. And the reality is, think back to 3-4 weeks ago when we think about the international stage, right? Not everybody thought he was the worst thing on earth, right? A lot of guys are hanging out at the bar like, yeah, this guy's a jerk, but he buys me beer. Or, hey, I'm dating his sister. So, I don't like what he's doing right now, but because I'm dating his sister, right, I'm going to stay out of this, right? I want to keep it cool with this guy. And so, with this idea that we could, again, come in and Jason Bourne the situation and take this guy out and that suddenly everything's going to be cool. One, there's two issues with that. I'll get to the decapitation issue next, but the first issue is how does that seen by the rest of the world, right? If this thing is just a fight's starting to break out, most people aren't paying attention. We roll in and just knock the shit out of somebody. Half the bars will be like, who's that jerk who just knocked out that other guy? Or, hey, man, I'm glad that guy just knocked him out. But hey, I'm going to still be hoping to get free beer from this other guy because he didn't see me as going against him. Now, look at what's happened with Germany and all the European communities. We've been complaining about Europeans taking responsibility for their own security for decades. And letting Putin show his ass and play out like this, we've got Germany doing a complete 360. It's like, yeah, we've been dependent on oil and gas forever, but now we're actually willing to say, okay, it's not worth it, right? Getting free beer from this guy is just not worth hanging out with this guy. And oh, by the way, now we're going to take some responsibility for our own defense. And so now, instead of it just us kind of parachuting in and taking something out, now we have a cohort. We have some unanimity among this crowd that says, yep, let's all work together and isolate this guy. Let's show him this isn't how you act. While also treading that fine line of, he still has a gun in his waistband. He could still pull it. And you know what? Maybe it doesn't feel awesome that we're not able to just give him a knockout punch and walk away into the credits, but hey, we've prevented the chance that someone else, us or someone else in the bar might get shot needlessly.
I love this construct, right? I think this is genius and we need to explore these comparisons. But is it not also a situation where the guy is in the bar, he's destroying the bar, he's reached behind the bar, he's beating the bartender, he's beating the family, he's beating the dishwasher, and we have a ring of people around him keeping him in that space, right? So the question becomes, how long do you think America will let this go on? Today we've got a theater bombed. We're going to see, what we're going to see. We're going to see children, we're going to see lots of civilians dead. we might see hundreds of thousands of civilians dead. Do you think America and let's just talk about America, because you're great at America, right? You're an expert on America. Do you think America will keep that circle with all our friends as this dude continues to beat children into the ground in the bar with a gun and shoot them and kill them and look for more?
Oh, there's a line, and I think what we're seeing is, we're seeing a slow ratcheting up of pressure. And, what the pleasant surprise of all this is he's not winning the fight, clearly. Maybe he'll be able to overwhelm eventually. But, I think the kid he was trying to pick on is standing up pretty well, right? Which even better further undercuts and increases, right? It lays bare the idea this guy is a bully and he's weak. And the more that happens as well, the more he's undercut at home, right? The more he's got to figure out, hey, maybe I can't continue to bully my way through power. And again, his messianic complex, right? The way, you always unify in the face of external enemies. And whether we like it or not, and we certainly don't agree with it, right? His framing, and unfortunately, too high number of Americans bought into his speech outlining all of his grievances. They took it hook, line, and sinker, like, yeah, this guy has a valid case. We have to reject that. But by the same token, we have to understand that many of the people around him and working with him fully believe that. But now it's being exposed, right? He's not the strongest guy around. He doesn't run a super competent military. He's got a lot of shiny toys that he's let corrode, corrupt, and devolve. People have clearly been robbing him blind in terms of the money that the Russian government has spent, both on its military and in its intelligence efforts. People have clearly taken money out of that and put it in their own pockets. So there's a reckoning to take place within there. And I'll also go back to, the decapitation side of this. We always think that if you take out the bully or the head of state, right? If we just kill Saddam, if we just take out bin Laden, if we just take out Putin, that clearly what's waiting in the wings is a vibrant and healthy and constructive democracy. It's never the case, right? You'd think we'd learn that year after year after year. So, yep, this guy's horrible. But
can I turn that on its head a little bit though, and ask you? Trump's gone, and things are a lot better, right? And maybe Trump is more like Putin than Putin is like Saddam or someone else. Like, sure, you and I both wish that this was how we approached Iraq instead of sending us in there with our buddies to fight and die. I wonder if it is better without him. And the question really becomes, how does this end? I think there seems to be this naivete that Putin's going to come to the table and sit down and negotiate. I don't know if that's going to happen. I feel like he's going to go as far as he can until he either runs out of gas, he dies, or he's stopped, right? And what I really want to ask you to dig into, because your perspective is so unique, you understand the tactical components. You understand the strategic components on the ground. You've been a military officer. You teach this stuff. What do you see in the fight? You're kind of like, if you're a retired quarterback, I'm going to ask you to be Tony Romo for a second. What do you see on the battlefield that maybe generals who are dominating this conversation don't see? What should people look at that maybe you see and they don't see? Can you help us look at the actual combat that we're seeing and what jumps out at you as most important or maybe most underreported?
Well, the two dynamics are military competence and then the will to fight and the narrative on both sides. We have made the mistake before of misreading the narratives of the countries we fight in. It's not a direct comparison, but the fact that we lost the messaging battle to the Taliban year after year, we can't get on our high horse. And we can certainly celebrate the fact that Putin misread the Ukrainian people. But we can't get too much on our high horse because we have to recognize that we haven't always read the populations of the countries we've invaded either. So that's one dynamic that we should be very familiar with, right? He miscalculated. He believed his own internal narrative, his own stories. And this is, again, where the billions of dollars that he was paying his intel services to find local partisans who would rise up and help take over Ukraine, all the prep time spent talking about Nazis. I think he really was very much in his own bubble. And if there's probably no more common mistake that superpowers make, right? It's that idea of like, hey, we believe our own stuff, and that's great. We should. I believe
this is Iraq. We will be greeted like liberators.
Yeah, and I believe in the American narrative. I believe that we're a force for freedom and good. But what I've learned both in Iraq and Afghanistan is that not only it's not just a question of whether people also believe our narrative. A lot of them haven't even heard it. Right? They're looking at a completely different set of facts, figures, historical precedents, and narratives, right? They haven't even heard the story of the American founding. They don't know what we're all about when we touch these things. And so we have to be careful. And that's one of the mistakes. That's the biggest mistake that Putin made, was convincing himself that this flimsy justification that, hey, this is all part of Russia, they're going to love us. That's one. The second one, where we have not made the same mistake, is obviously military competence. And there's, for as much as I will admit the failings of the American military over the last 20 years in terms of our inability to adapt to the fights we were in, the American military does train these complex operations to a fairly large degree. In fact, I have to submit that we did that for 20 years at the expense of understanding the wars we were in. That aside, what has happened with Russia and I think the reason a lot of us are surprised is because we evaluate our military and foreign militaries on the shiny objects. It's like, look at that jet. That's an awesome jet. It can do so many things.
Right.
But holy shit, you know how hard it is to keep a jet in the air, right? We know, right? And so the Russian military is great at sending 2 jets to an air show. And everybody's like, man, that is some high-tech, state-of-the-art stuff. But now, can those jets actually work with a battle group on the ground? And can they communicate with the tanker on the ground who's trying to maneuver and who's also communicating with your friendly air defense assets to not shoot at the wrong airplane? Are you talking to the artillery to make sure they're clearing the skies? And here's where this paper tiger of, I have a bunch of shiny objects, but I've never had the wherewithal to actually put money or training into the people operating these things. You cannot do a complex battle with the bulk of your force being made up of 1-year conscripts. You just can't. It's barely enough time to learn how to shoot your own weapon and maybe operate in a squad. It tells you nothing about how do you actually navigate and coordinate all these really cool shiny objects that are just that.
Yeah. Even in a secure net, right? Like we're hearing Ukrainians talking to these guys on wide open nets, where you've also got on the other side, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands, but battle tested Ukrainians who've been fighting the Russians in the East for since 2008, right? That is built into a culture and a generation, and it kind of takes me to another question I want to ask you, because you're the right guy. You're a student of the American Revolution. I'm looking behind you at the history on your wall for folks who want to watch this on video. A lot of our friends are there now, or a number of our friends are there now. A number of our friends are on their way or trying to research it now. Veterans and also just people who consider themselves soldiers in the good fight. Right? Yeah. Many of them consider this the good fight. I feel a tug. I don't know if you do or not. Can you break down, what do you think about that? I mean, some folks have said this is 1776 for Ukraine, right? And friends of ours are there now on their way. There will be more. And the propaganda value there on both sides is tremendous. If the Russians kill one of our friends, or if Zelensky makes him his new bodyguard, either way, this could pull us in deeper in the same way the passing of my friend Brent Renaud did a couple of days ago. Can you talk about this component?
I think
and how it might be unique against anything we've faced?
Yeah, it's problematic, right? I mean, I understand the tug. I think there's a little bit of fantasy projection on a lot of folks, running over there thinking, well, hey, this is my chance to get after it, right? And getting after it in a conventional fight is much different than, doing a raid off of a fob, and coming back to hot chow. I've seen reports of some volunteer units kind of disintegrating, right? Faced with Russian bombardment, and you're seeing tanks coming down the road for the first time. That's something a lot of American veterans haven't faced. I'm also, there's always that dynamic of post-Vietnam war tourism, and the kind of the mercenary class. And I am concerned on the mental health component of how many folks. So again, it's not just a tug for righteousness, but it's a deep desire and it's a void that's seeking meaning through military engagement, even if they might not even be able to explain or understand this larger conflict. So I feel for some of them because I'm not sure they're going necessarily for righteous reasons, but out of I'm not going to get into the psyche of everybody going. On the tactical side, it's tough as well. Because I can see the consternation among some Ukrainian forces when some American shows up and is like, "Hey, let me tell you about all the raids I did in Afghanistan." He's like, "Shut up, fill some sandbags. I'll give you a rifle 3 days from now after you've proven you're just not some idiot, and that you're willing to fill sandbags." That said, right, I don't mean to denigrate everybody who's going over there, and I respect those who are making that decision for the most part. But we got to be careful. If the Russians capture them, and now we're in a super hard spot, right? You're kind of forcing the hand of the American government in ways that, we act as a nation. We only give the authority for military force to certain people because that's how we control it from becoming a free-for-all. I might think that, hey, it's a righteous fight to overthrow a dictator in Venezuela. But that puts the U.S. government in a really tough position if a bunch of cowboys arm themselves and go down to Venezuela and, are wearing U.S. military uniforms and using U.S. military type kit to try to do something. So,
everybody over there now is kind of Prince Harry, right, in the combat zone, right? I mean, from a propaganda standpoint, from a PR value, right, and could go either way. And Pat Tillman, I kept saying, who's going to be the first Pat Tillman, right? It could be a journalist, it could be, it could be somebody that we don't even know is there. But I think that the dynamism of it is kind of a fascinating component from a hearts and minds perspective. And what I'm getting at is, I don't know how Americans are going to react when a couple of SEALs get killed. Right. Yeah. And they're all over TV and we know their names and their wives or husbands are on TV. Right. And all this comes out. And so let me ask you maybe a final question, because I know your time is short and I don't know when my sick baby is going to wake back up again. But let me ask you a final question. What's next? I always want to tell people not just what's happening, but what's next. I know you can't predict the future, but you're smart about these things. Yeah. Where do you see this going in the next couple of weeks? Can the U.S. stay out of it? Or is there a way that we somehow get dragged into it?
I think we're in it in a very productive way. I honestly, I think for all the mismanagement and missteps we took, both in the execution of Afghanistan and in withdrawal particularly, I think this administration is kind of built for this thing. And it shows the power of diplomacy and all this really hard backroom work that gets the Germans say, yep, we're on this side. We're willing to rearm, refit. It gets all these countries aligned to truly isolate this regime in a way that's very painful. So, I think there's some negotiations ongoing. Right before we got on here, I saw some headlines about a latest draft potentially. There will be a negotiated settlement of some kind, right? And I think it's been proven he can't take the whole country. We're not going to like that negotiated settlement. It's going to involve overt Russian control of, I don't know if it's going to be, some places, he's had, over the last 5 years, maybe slightly more. We're not going to like it. But I think what we have to say is, okay, he got that while completely destroying his military, ruining his international credibility, and bankrupting his own economy. And so, yeah.
So that's how you think it ends. You think it ends with a negotiated settlement, Putin's still in power, the Ukrainians keep some part of their country, then you have occupied Ukraine and free Ukraine.
Yeah.
And then what do? We put up a wall and dance around each other until Putin dies?
Slowly strangle him. Keep him in his box. I think you've made it very clear. NATO is stronger now than it was certainly 3 weeks ago, let alone 5 years ago. And so, I think he knows where his box is now. He wanted this, he got just a little bit, but he paid so much more for it than I think he was prepared to
But
spend.
he's gonna, you're a betting man, or maybe you're not. He's gonna live to fight another day,
Yeah.
right? And that's going to be the Saddam comparisons are going to come around again, and all the other comparisons are going to come around. And he is a survivor, but I think there is a need for quick closure in the United States, especially. There's a
Mm-hmm.
need for it to be clean. But I mean, you and I have talked about this. It's going to be messy in the
Yep.
world for a long time.
And this is where it goes back to a great phrase I heard once. So the problem with Americans is they look at the world as problems to be solved, whereas the Europeans look at the world and see dilemmas to be managed. I would love if we could just take Putin out, completely decapitate his regime, keep it, or at the very least keep him in a small box, and just completely protect Ukraine under the sphere of direct American influence. That's not the way the world works. And I think we have to manage it, understand that we're better. Well, Russia has it. My heart goes out to the people of Ukraine, and I think we need to continue to do everything we can within what we've done. Stingers and javelins are just amazing, and I think we've massively helped them out. And at the end of the day, they're going to be, this negotiated settlement is not going to be the best, but it's going to be a negotiated settlement with a much weakened Russia. And I think we can continue to manage that, and we can continue to manage it in a way that's in our interest, that prevents somebody random from getting shot. And the guy at the bar saying, "Screw it, I'm pulling out my gun and taking everybody with me." Right? I think that's what we can manage.
Well, if I ever have to go into a bar, I want you by my side. I'm glad you're on my side. I think it's a really compelling and powerful number of constructs and perspectives you brought to this conversation, and I think a really thoughtful, not necessarily defense, but like explanation or analysis of Biden right now, which I think is needed. And I'm grateful for your perspective. I'm grateful for your leadership. I hope next time we talk, Biden has you closer to his side than you are now. Until then, man, I really appreciate all that you do for this country and the insight you provide. I hope you'll come back again, and thank you for all you do, my friend.
As always, thanks for having these conversations, man. They're needed.
You got it, brother. Stay vigilant.